Greetings and welcome to Lecture 7.2, Unit Analysis 2, Area and Volume. In the past, we've worked with several geometric objects like the square, rectangle, as well as triangle. And we have a nice formula to calculate the area of each of these objects. Now, we're going to consider area and volume in terms of units. And what would a square yard equal in square feet, as well as what does square inches equal in square feet. So let's consider a square foot. Well, a square foot is a foot times a foot. And if we want to know how many inches that is, then each of these 1 foot I have to convert over to inches. So 1 foot times its conversion factor, as well as the second foot by its conversion factor. Therefore, each foot will cancel out, leaving me with 12 inches times 12 inches, which is 144 inches squared. Much different than what we were doing before. So now we know that 1 square foot is 144 square inches, and we have a conversion factor for that. 144 inches squared over 1 foot squared, or 1 foot squared over 144 inches. So let's take this into consideration and say we have a poster. It measures 36 inches by 24 inches. How many square feet of wall space will it cover? Well, I know my area of the poster is 36 inches times 24 inches. In other words, it's 864 inches squared. But now I need to convert the inches squared to feet squared. I have my conversion factor in there. And I am left with 864 feet squared divided by 144, because the inches squared cancel out, leaving me with 6 square feet, or 6 feet squared. However you like to say it, or however you like to write it, but it is feet squared. Unit measures are incredibly important when you're talking about this, because square feet is totally different than square inches. And because of that, you need to be very explicit as to what unit of measure you're talking about. In one instance, I believe it was in the Mars rover, they did some calculations and they actually mixed up the units. And because of that, their measurements were off, and I think it had to do with yards and meters. They did conversion wrong, or they calculated in meters, but they programmed it for feet, something like that. And they ended up being wrong, desperately wrong, and costing probably billions of dollars in that incident. So you want to be very careful about conversion, as well as knowing, or at least letting your folks around you know, what unit of measure you are using. For the U.S. units of area, we have square inches and square feet. 144 square inches is 1 foot. I'm not going to discuss the conversion factor. You can see those. But for the first one, I will discuss that it's just 1 unit over the other. 144 inches squared over 1 foot squared, or 1 foot squared over 144 inches squared. Square yards to square feet. 1 square yard is going to be 3 feet by 3 feet. So 3 feet by 3 feet, multiply it together, 9 feet squared. That's how you figure out what your conversion is. Acres and square feet. 1 acre is 43,960 feet squared. Acres and a square mile. There are 640 acres in 1 square mile. Here's an example. A dressmaker orders a bolt of material that is 1.5 yards wide and 30 yards long. How many square feet of material was ordered? So first, the area in yards is going to be 1.5 yards times 30 yards giving us 45 yards squared. Now we use our conversion from feet to yards. So 45 yards squared times 9 feet squared over 1 yard squared. The yard squared will cancel out, giving us 405 feet squared. In the North Pacific Ocean, the currents are such that a lot of all the debris that's in the ocean seems to congregate. And this area is called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Now, this floating mass of pollution is about 344 million acres, or about twice the size of Texas. So let's figure out what the area is in square miles. 344 million acres I need to convert to miles. So my conversion is going to be 1 mile squared is to 640 acres. The acres and acres will cancel out, leaving us 537,500 miles squared. Now when you think about this, this is a huge area. It is actually, if you list all of the countries from largest to smallest, this would rank somewhere between Mongolia and Peru. Mongolian is about 600,000 square miles and Peru is almost 500,000 square miles. So it would actually be our 18th largest country if this was an actual land mass. It's a pretty huge floating mass of pollution. Let's try another example. A farmer has 75 acres of land. How many square feet of land does the farmer have? So we need to convert from acres to feet. 75 acres times 43,560 feet squared to 1 acre. Again, the acres will cancel out, leaving us 3,267,000 feet squared. The conversions are pretty straightforward. Again, you are looking for the conversion factor that will cancel out the units that you currently have and leave you with the currents you want to have. We have a new shopping center that's going to be constructed on 256 acres of land. How many square miles is this? So 250 acres, and my conversion factor is 1 mile squared is to 640 acres. The acres will cancel out, leaving us 256 over 640 miles squared. That should be miles squared, leaving us with a 0.04 miles squared, almost a half a mile squared. Metric units of area are similar to the length units, but again, think of it as a square. So it's going to be millimeters squared to centimeters squared. So 1 centimeter squared is 100 millimeters squared. Centimeter squared to decimeter squared. 1 decimeter squared is 100 centimeters squared. A decimeter squared to a meter squared is 1 meter squared to 100 decimeters. Metric unit is, I think, simpler to work with because it's all powers of 10. Meter squared to errors squared, or errors, is 1 errors to 100 meters squared. 1 errors to a hectare, 1 hectare is 100 errors. So you see nicely the conversion factor is the larger unit to 100 of the smaller unit. Now this is just the next step up. So millimeters to the next step up, centimeters, would be 100 units. But if I wanted to go from millimeters to decimeters, it's 100 times 100. If I wanted to go from millimeter squared to meter squared, it's going to be 100 times 100 times 100. See how that works? Let's put it in play. How many square millimeters are in 1 square meter? So the easiest way to do it is I have 1 square meter. How many millimeters are in there? So I go from meters to decimeters to centimeters to millimeters. So millimeters to decimeters. There's 100 decimeters in 1 meter squared. There are 100 centimeters squared to 1 decimeter squared, and there are 100 millimeters squared in a centimeter squared. The meters squared, the decimeter squared, and the centimeter squared will all drop out, leaving me with 1 times 100 times 100 times 100 millimeters squared, or 1 million millimeters squared, or in 1 meter squared. Previously, we were talking about area, which is a two-dimensional concept. Now we're going to move to the unit of volume, which is a three-dimensional unit. So cubic inches, or inches cubed, and cubic feet. Well, 1 foot is 12 inches. But if I have 1 foot times 1 foot times 1 foot, that would be 12 inches times 12 inches times 12 inches, or 1728 inches cubed. Cubic feet to cubic yards. Well, in 1 yard, I have 3 feet. Therefore, 1 yard times 1 yard times 1 yard would be 3 feet times 3 feet times 3 feet, which is 27 feet cubed. Now that's for distance, but we also have fluid. If you think about a container, I could fill it up with fluid, and I have fluid containers. So 1 fluid ounce is 16 fluid ounces is equivalent to 1 pint. 1 quart is our next measurement up. There are 2 pints in 1 quart. And then our next measurement up from there is a gallon. So there are 4 quarts in 1 gallon. Let's consider what the capacity or volume in pints of a 1 gallon container. So it doesn't matter what it holds, we'll just say it holds milk. So 1 gallon, I can go to gallons to quarts to pints. So 1 gallon is equivalent to 4 quarts, and 2 pints is equivalent to 1 quart. So 1 gallon times 4 quarts is to 1 gallon, times 2 pints to 1 quart. So the gallons will cancel out, the quarts will cancel out, and I have 1 times 4 times 2 pints. So there are 8 pints in 1 gallon. Let's try this example. A boy is helping his mother in the garden, and he wants to fill his radio flyer wagon. If you don't know what that is, that's like one of those little red wagons, no higher than the top of the wagon. It can hold 2,835 cubic inches of potting soil. How many cubic feet of soil can he carry in one load? And we're going to round this to the nearest hundredth. 2,835 inches cubed is equivalent to 2,835 inches cubed to it times its conversion factor. 1 foot cubed is to 1,728 inches cubed. The inches cubed and inches cubed will divide out, leaving us with 2,835 feet cubed over 1,728. That is approximately 1.64 feet cubed, or cubic feet, however you want to say it. Here's an example. A dairy herd produces 1,800 quarts of milk each day. How many gallons is this equivalent to? Well, 1,800 quarts. The conversion factor is going to be 1 gallon to 4 quarts. The quarts will divide out. Now I have 1,800 gallons over 4, leaving us with 450 gallons. So that's it for part 1 of this lecture. So until next time, be seeing you.